Hi everyone, and welcome to Beloit College. We are excited to have so many community members on our campus tonight, and we want to warmly welcome you all here. We're positive our panel members won't disappoint you with what they have to teach us about incarceration in Wisconsin this evening. I'm Leah Shefsky.
I'm Rochelle Perry. We work for the Spiritual Life program here, organizing Better Together, which is a student campaign for interfaith social justice and service. For the past couple of years, we've focused our campaign around incarceration issues, and we're excited to be partnering with Job, a faith-based community organizing group, to bring you this panel tonight.
Before we begin, we'd like to go over a few logistics. Ushers, on your way in, should have handed you note cards with a pencil if you have any questions during for our Q&A time. They will be collected around 7:45. If you could pass them to the ends of your row, then we'll let you know when to do that. And the ushers will collect them. If you didn't get a note card and you would like one, raise your hand and they'll come find you and get one to you. There will also be clipboards going around during the Q&A if you would like to stay involved with the issues and organizations that are represented here tonight. And on your way out, we would like to invite you to check out the plethora of information and opportunities we have in the lobby if you didn't get an opportunity to look at those on your way in. Also, the panel tonight is being videotaped and will be posted on the Spiritual Life program's YouTube channel. Just search for Beloit Spiritual Life on YouTube and you should be able to find it.
So we'd especially like to take a moment to recognize any elected officials and people currently running for office who are here tonight to take part in this important discussion. We know your calendars are really full, and we wanted to thank you for taking valuable time to engage with this issue. And at this time, we'd like to invite any of you who are here to stand and be recognized.
We'd also like to thank a whole lot of people who worked on putting this event together. Ruth Kolpak and folks at Joe, Bill Conover, and a number of other campus and community members who helped make tonight happen in a multitude of ways.
So tonight we're grateful that a leading activist in our state, David Liners from Wisdom, is here with us. David has worked as an organizer and trainer for the Gamaliel Foundation since March of 1997. He has served as the lead organizer of MICA, which is the Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allied for Hope, for 5 years. And for the past 11 years, he has served as the director for the statewide Wisdom Network, which has grown from 3 to 11 local organizations and includes more than 150 congregations. So we'll turn it over to David now.
Good evening. Thank you very much. This is an unusual position for me. By profession, I'm a community organizer, so we usually are not in the front. We're usually hang around in the back. As a matter of fact, I even told my wife this morning, I said, do you ever picture in your wildest dreams me standing in front of an auditorium of people at Beloit College? And she said, you're not in my wildest dreams. What we're going to do tonight is, first I'm going to just give you a very quick introduction of our panelists, and then we're going to ask each of them a question to kind of get the ball rolling and kind of to touch on some of the topics around mass incarceration. Then we're going to allow the panelists some time to actually ask each other questions, and then we'll deal with those note cards that you'll have filled out, and we'll take your questions for them. At the end, we'll have a little bit of advertising about things coming up and possibilities for you. So let me just tell you quickly who's here, up in front. Sheriff Bob Spoden, right here, was elected to his first term as sheriff beginning January of 2007 and was re-elected in 2010. Sheriff Spoden's a 26-year veteran of the Rock County Sheriff's Office. He began his career in 1988 when he was hired as a correctional officer, attending the Jail Recruit Academy at Madison Area Technical College. In 1989, he was promoted to deputy sheriff, graduated from Waukesha Technical College Law Enforcement Academy, and served in the Patrol Bureau. In 1992, Sheriff Spoden served as the first DARE officer in the Sheriff's Office. In 1995, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant assigned to lead the training bureau. At that time, he took command of the hostage negotiations team, where he's been serving since 1991. In 2000, he was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, assigned to command the Community Corrections Bureau. In 2002, he was assigned as the first shift commander of the jail division. In April 2004, he was promoted to the rank of chief deputy, serving as second in command to the sheriff's office. In 2009, he was selected as one of only 23 sheriffs nationwide to attend the National Sheriff's Institute in Washington, D.C., learning the best practices in law enforcement and corrections. He's a graduate of George S. Parker High School, holds an associate degree in police science from Black Hawk Tech, and a bachelor's degree in public administration from Upper Iowa University. In 2010, he was appointed by Chief Justice Shirley Abrahamson to serve on the Committee of Lawyer Regulations, and in addition, Governor Doyle appointed him to serve on the Department of Corrections Council of Offender Reentry. In 2011, he was appointed by Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen to serve on the Wisconsin Crime Alert Network Development Committee. He's married, lives in Janesville with his wife and 2 sons. So, Sheriff Bob Spoden. At the other end of the table, Charles Westerberg is the Brannon Ballard Professor of Sociology. Westerberg, I'm sorry. I know another guy named Westenberg, but that's not him. Charles Westerberg, let's do this again, is the Brannon Ballard Professor of Sociology at Beloit College. He is also the Associate Dean at the college and Director of the Liberal Arts in Practice Center at Beloit. He teaches courses in criminology and has published work on patterns of capital punishment usage in the U.S. and the growing prison privatization pattern. So please welcome Professor Charles Westerberg. Back over here next to the sheriff, you have Regina Duncan. Regina is the Executive Director of the Merrill Community Center in Beloit. She's been in that position since 1998. She attended Beloit College and has over 15 years of social service experience. She played a vital role in establishing a new Merrill Community Center, the first children's program for the Beloit Domestic Violence Center, Community Action's Fresh Start program, the Girls Who Rock Mentorship program, and the Eclipse Charter School. She's married to Deputy Chief Tom Duncan of the Beloit Police Department, has 3 children, here's the astonishing thing, and 4 grandchildren. Take a look at her there. As a community leader, she advocates for those who don't have a voice. Although she's a native of Gary, Indiana, she's proud to call Beloit her home and honored to represent citizens of Wisconsin. She was appointed to the Wisconsin State Public Defender Board by Governor Jim Doyle and reappointed to that same board by Governor Walker. She's also served as president of the Charter School Board for the Eclipse Charter School and is a leader who consistently gives back to the children and families of her community. So that's Regina Duncan. And last but not least, Eric Williams works for Community Action, and he works with the Fatherhood Program, directs the Fatherhood Program there. He's been in Beloit for 2 years. Before that, he was in Rockford with the Safer Foundation, which helps formerly incarcerated people to get employment. He's also the executive director for the Grounds of Life Recovery House in Rockford, which there are 3 of them, did you say? 3 houses? 2 houses. For people who are in recovery from drug and alcohol coming from drug and alcohol treatment, or people coming out of prison, or people coming through traumatic situations. And he is the proud father of 2 daughters. So that's Eric Williams. So to start with the questions, and you all can help me and look uncomfortable if they go more than 5 minutes, because they know they're not supposed to take more than 5 minutes for their first answer here. So the first question we're going to give to Charles, and that is, mass incarceration seems to be a relatively recent phenomenon. As recently as the 70s, we only had about 20% of the jail and prison population that we have today. And it's also kind of a localized phenomenon. I mean, other parts of the world don't seem to have this problem. So what happened? How did we get to this situation where we have such a huge incarcerated population?
Well, thank you for that very small question.
Yes.
It's always interesting for me to note, one of my favorite works, I'm an alum of Beloit College myself, and I was a political science major in my student days, and I can remember the first time I read Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And it was much later that I figured out that de Tocqueville came to write that very famous book about American democracy. He first came to America to study the prison systems, and he wrote a very famous book called The Prison System in the United States and Its Application in France. And so I think that, there's a very interesting connection, between what democracy means in the United States and how we handle incarceration here. I wanted to respond directly to the question about why we have this growing prison population by, framing out some of the conflicting goals that we have for punishment. And the U.S. Department of Justice for the Bureau of Prisons outlines 4 goals. One of them is that our punishments should be deterrent. They should exist to try to keep other people from committing those kinds of acts. They should be incapacitative. That means that if someone who is a danger to the rest of society, we can hold them out for a period of time. They should be rehabilitative, and they should be retributive, meaning that they should have a punishment value all their own. And I've always been startled at how contradictory, if we really start to think about those 4 goals that we lay out, that we have for our system of imprisonment. And what we've seen over time is the ebb and flow of which goal we pay more attention to at any particular time. And between the end of World War II and the mid-1970s, the rehabilitative ideal was alive, and it was thriving. And since that time, we have seen a shift, first to a focus on deterrence, and more recently, a focus explicitly on incapacitation. And to me, that is one of the largest reasons that we see this tremendous spike in the incarcerated population. I would point to 3 policy shifts that really affected that transition as well, and the 3 are related. First is mandatory minimum sentencing. The second is truth in sentencing laws. And the third is habitual offender laws, sometimes referred to as 3 strikes laws. I would also note that over that period, the way in which we handled our work with mentally ill and disabled persons changed radically from a policy of much more heavy institutionalization and close care to one of independence. And many criminologists point to that as another key reason for this spike in the incarcerated population. So, as David points out, the United States has a larger incarceration rate than any other country in the world. And our competitors are places that we don't normally like to compare our policy preferences to. When we start to line ourselves up with those nations, they're down in the 123, 124 area, and we're, number 1. So I think I'll just, at the risk of getting out of control.
Thank you very much. Eric, next question's for you. We all know, I think we've heard by now, that mass incarceration is breaking the bank. I think it was a couple years ago that we learned that in Wisconsin we actually spend more of our tax money on the Department of Corrections than we do on the university system. But we don't hear too much more about the impact that it has on the families and on the community in general. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. What's the impact, not so much on the person in prison, or not so much on the state budget, but what's the impact on the community around those who are incarcerated?
First of all, it takes about $35,000 a year to house a person in a penal institution. That person is removed from the family structure. So once they're incarcerated, they're taken from the household. And what happens is, upon their release, if the wife or significant other is in subsidized housing, they can't go back to that household. They have to find other housing. How it affects the children, in my fatherhood program, 95% of my participants are fatherless fathers. So even if they have a desire to go back and be a part of the family structure, if the significant other is receiving housing or any type of subsidized housing, they can't go back. The other piece is they suffer from a lot of substance abuse issues, mental health issues, and those issues haven't been addressed. So what happens is, long term, they're not prepared for the employment opportunities that are available. So they're thrown back out into society and expected to, people say, become productive members of society, whatever that might be. And so the children suffer, the participants suffer, the men suffer, the families suffer, the neighborhoods suffer, the community suffers. And it's bigger than just one program. We have to really sit down and develop relationships with these individuals so that we can bring them back into the family, bring them back into the community, help them get adjusted to the workforce. And it's just, it's a big phenomenon. And I work with these people on a daily basis, and I understand their pain. They want to be a part of their children's life. They want to be a part of the community, but they feel ostracized. They feel as though they've been labeled and cast out, and they're not welcome. Some of the faith-based organizations, the churches and things like that, they feel as though they're not accepted. So with all that said, it's more important that people take personal responsibility for not only themselves, but also for their neighbors, their communities, their children, and try to welcome them and try to put them in a better position to help nurture them through that process. But long term, what has happened is men have been really just taken out of the whole family structure, and you have a lot of single parents raising children. We have young ladies raising men, and it just becomes, I could talk about it for the rest of this evening if you allow me to, but until we provide some opportunities, we provide some resources, we come together as a community to welcome this population and to try to work through whatever their issues may be so that they can become gainfully employed and members of the family. We're going to continue to have all kinds of issues. So,
thank you. Thank you very much. My egalitarian self, I always kind of figure if you're going to give one person a title, you should give everybody a title. And if you're going to call one person by their first name, you call everybody by their first name. But it's hard not to call the sheriff. So, right, Bob, I did it. A lot of people, and Charles actually even kind of mentioned a little bit some of the reasons that we, have kind of gone to such high incarceration rates, so that at least having so many people locked up, at least it keeps us safer. At least we're keeping the dangerous people, we're keeping the bad guys off the street. And other people will say that the incarceration rate doesn't have any relationship whatsoever to crime. And other people will tell you that it actually makes it worse, that by over-incarcerating we actually make ourselves less safe. As sheriff, where do you stand on all that?
First of all, my wife never had a problem calling me Bob or several other things, but that's usually in relationship to taking the trash out. Historically, I think Americans have always really hungered for very simple answers to very complicated problems. And I think over a period of time, we've heard the slogans we all remember, get tough on crime, just say no to drugs, the war on drugs. And they make really good sound bites for politicians. And they are very popular, and I know that they were very popular at a period of time in the 80s and the 90s, not only on the federal level, but on the state level and even the local level. But the fact of the matter is that the problems that we encounter with crime, with the use of narcotics and drugs are very complicated. They're based on a society that has to a certain degree, forgotten a certain segment of its society and of its people. And what we need to do is we need to realize that simply arresting people and incarcerating them without offering treatment, without offering a means to get back into society and be productive is really setting up a failure for the future. And while we have had a large increase in our incarceration rates, and some can point that crime in the United States, certain violent crime, has gone down. The fact of it is that those individuals are all going to be released. It's just a matter of time. And if they don't have a proper way that they can re-enter in their community, then they're not going to succeed. And they're going to fall back into the same pattern of behavior that led to them committing a crime to begin with. I had an opportunity, I try to go around to the different areas of our jail and talk to inmates, just kind of one-on-one, to kind of see how things are going and just really to get a sense of where they're at. And I asked about prison. I said, we know that individuals sometimes serve 5 to 7 years. In your experience in the prison system, what have you seen and how do you feel it does as far as creating an atmosphere for somebody to be rehabilitated? And he was very direct. He said, Sheriff, the bottom line is prisons are the university of crime. People go in there and they are surrounded by people who are not being treated, they're not being held accountable, they're not being given the right support systems to try and change their behavior. And because of that, it becomes more or less somebody mentoring who already is, committed numerous crimes, mentoring a young person who comes in and teaches them what not to do the next time when they want to commit a crime. So, I don't believe that the incarceration rate has any effect on crime. I think to a certain degree it has reduced violent crime only because these people are being housed. But as I said earlier, all of these individuals at some point are going to be released. And they're going to come back into our neighborhoods, they're going to come back into our community. And it's in our best interest, both from a safety standpoint and from a standpoint of really effective and efficient use of our resources, that we prepare them for that transition and that we mentor them and keep them to a certain degree in a system or with a support group that's going to prevent them from falling back into the same types of behavior that created the situation that they're in. So that would be basically my response for that. So, there.
Thank you. And Regina. Whoa. So another kind of common response, to kind of complaints about mass incarceration is people say, well, we have to hold people accountable. We can't just kind of let people off. As if prisons and jails were the only way for a person to be held accountable. As if they were the only way for a person to actually be able to change in their life. Could you tell us a little bit about some of your experience of dealing with some of the alternatives to incarceration? What are other ways that we can deal with people who've got issues, who perhaps have kind of gotten off track?
I think the alternatives to incarceration have to be part of the criminal justice system equation. I think if they're used effectively, they can actually save the community resources in the long run. Several members, I serve besides being director of Merrill Center, I serve on the Wright County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And I know we had a report on Thursday that was given to us where we had some members attend a national training last month on research-based approaches to crime reduction. Because of the groundbreaking work in this area underway, which is in Eau Claire and Milwaukee, the conference was held in Wisconsin, and over 20 Wisconsin counties were in attendance. I think that we have to address the issues at the front end, which is a counterpoint to questions about the truth in sentencing. Treatment courts and diversion opportunities are example of front-end efforts. The good news is that many of the proven ways to reduce crime are also less costly than the use of long jail and prison sentences as a strategy. Also, community-based treatment programs and activities are more successful than incarceration at addressing root issues. Different people respond, we know that, to different types of programs and sanctions. Therefore, an individualized approach works better than one size fits all. Also, there is a trend toward the use of research to inform decision-making in our justice system. The EDM, which is the evidence-based decision-making. Another trend is the increased number of problem-solving courts. And then there's the alternatives to incarceration are an excellent example of taking personal responsibility. One key is to the success of treatment courts and alternatives is the willingness of the individual to participate. By giving them the choice to participate, as well as the keys to their own success by participating in their treatment, they have the ability and the responsibility to succeed. For example, we have our drug court. However, I do think that as a council, we may need to revisit the criteria. And also, I think overall, we can only monitor the data that we get as it pertains to the alternatives that we have in place and go from there. It'll take some time to see the impact of the large number of those programs. But we'll really have to look at those, especially as it pertains to the numbers of people who are being incarcerated, the people of color.
Good. Thank you. So this is the point here where you guys get to ask each other questions or make comments, but I have actually a couple of real quick questions that I'd want to ask you. With the alternative programs, the kind of stuff, Rock County is actually held up around the state as a real leader, as a place where you're doing really well and being kind of innovative in alternatives. What percentage would you say of the people who could be reached through alternative programs are you able to reach with the programs that you have as they are now? Like, do you have a sense, like, are you really able to deter everybody you could?
Yeah, I think obviously we're always looking to improve the numbers of people that we can reach out for. One of the things that we have, and that I'm a very firm believer, is mental health courts. The problem that we have, and that we've seen again, and I think Wisconsin, and Chuck may be able to answer that too, is indicative of a lot of states, is that the resources over a period of time have been cut. And so you don't have the mental health resources to deal with people. So, if you wanted to use mental health courts and have alternatives, it's very difficult to allow someone back into the community to receive treatment and resources because they just don't exist. And so there's also not the resources with the health services to monitor these people, to make sure that they're adhering and taking their medication and dealing in ways that are going to keep them from coming into the back door of your local jail. And so that's something I think we need to address. I am really pleased with the fact that Rock County is a leader in a lot of alternatives, whether it's Veterans Court or the Alcohol Court or the Drug Court. And I can tell you that all the stakeholders are very committed to that. That being said, at the same time, we have to constantly be monitoring ourselves and seeing if are we reaching the population that we need to in order to be successful. I'll also tell you that when I took over as sheriff in 2007, we were averaging a daily population of right around 600, as well as shipping out 100 inmates per day to other counties to house. And we really, I believe, took a strong commitment. And a lot of that was based on that, the alternative was that we were going to build a $70 million jail and correction facility. And at that time, the taxpayers couldn't do it. And so I think that what we're seeing, what happened in Rock County, where we were able to get the support of the community, as much as I wish it was because of their commitment to trying to do the right thing, it was their commitment to try to save some tax dollars. And candidly speaking, I'll take that as long as we can continue to move forward. But we were able to move forward, and as of today, we average about 27% of our inmate population in Rock County is in some type of alternative. And we went from averaging a 600 person bed day to right now our population today was 392. So we have right now, we have well over 100 and almost close to 130 open beds. So it's working, because here's the other side of that. You don't see massive increases in crime. You don't see massive increases in thefts, in violent crimes. obviously crimes are still going to take place, but they're not a direct result of these alternative programs. So if alternatives are managed properly, if they're used effectively, they can make a difference, I believe, not only at the local level, but at the state level as well.
Just in terms of follow-up, I've been really struck by this, especially as being somebody in higher education. A lot of the work that's talked about in the press about whether higher education is worth it or not, and one of the key indices that's brought to bear on this question is a return on investment index. And this is one of the things that criminologists have lately been calling more and more for, like, why are we not talking about return on investment in this context? And of course, it's a complicated question, but I just wanted to, especially given what we heard from Bob, that there is not, clear evidence that there is a big return in terms of incarceration.
I guess one thing I'd like to follow up with that is that, we were looking at a $70 million expansion. We scrapped that. We scaled back. We invested into alternatives, which were far more cost effective. I mean, an average cost of starting a program, whether it's our garden program, is a lot cheaper than housing somebody at the jail or in prison, at an extremely high price. And so we went from looking at a $70 million expansion to we went to a $6 million renovation. And so for that, I mean, I just can't say enough about what alternatives can do if they're managed effectively, and if there's a commitment by the stakeholders and those in the community to make it work. And there was a period of time, and I think maybe you could comment on that, because I sat on some of those panels, that we had a Secretary of Corrections in Wisconsin, Secretary Ramish, who was committed to that. And I know that he and I had several long conversations about trying to duplicate some of the things that we were doing at the state level. But as you know, the political winds changed, and in 2010 we got a different administration in the governor's house, and we had a different party that took control of the legislature. So a lot of those things got derailed, and I'm not sure what direction they're headed now, but at the same time, we're looking at Wisconsin, who has a huge amount of inmate population versus the state of Minnesota. And I guess I'd like to see if Chuck could comment on the differences between those two.
Yeah, well, I guess this is the main reason. I mean, I have a high degree of nervousness about this, because I don't see a lot of steps moving in the direction you were talking about under the previous secretary, and that's one of the main reasons that I am really, and as loudly as I can, trying to make this return on investment point, because this return on investment point should be persuasive to the current administration.
I have one. What's
Go
the
ahead.
recidivism rate in Wisconsin, Charles?
It's about 35%. It's actually, recidivism has decreased in Wisconsin since about 1993 or 1994. And Wisconsin's recidivism rate is actually lower than would be expected given the size of our population.
Let's put in a real quick little commercial announcement here I mentioned Secretary Ramish. If anybody wants to look it up, a couple days ago in the New York Times, the guy, he used to be the Secretary of Corrections for Wisconsin. He now has the same job in Colorado. And he had an editorial, an op-ed in the New York Times the other day, and he actually had himself put in solitary confinement to see what it was like. And it's chilling to read this. I mean, he's amazed himself that anybody doesn't lose their mind. It's this kind of amazing little challenge that it occurred to him that he should actually know what this is like if he's going to run a system, and he's now committed to saying, no, this is torture. We're going to use this only in the most extraordinary and short-term way. Another question that actually, by the way, you all should be doing your questions, and pretty soon here we're going to get to questions from the audience. But one other question, it was alluded to a couple times, is certainly in our state, the racial disparity of who goes to jail and who goes to prison it's off the charts. It's ridiculous. I was going to say it's inexplicable, but I'm actually going to ask you to explain it. Why is that? Do you have a sense of what went wrong there and what steps we can start to take? Anybody?
Who wants to jump on?
I think the explanation that most often gets put forward is that in some respects the racial disparity is a proxy for concentrated poverty, for concentrated socioeconomic disparities. And there are other options as well for hypotheses for why this might be, but we don't have a definitive answer. But I am quite compelled by this notion of concentrated inequality.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a shot at that, or other questions or comments for each other?
I think it has to do with some of the drug laws and some of those mandatory sentencing laws that had taken place. I think that has a lot to do with it. I think we had a lot of our people being incarcerated for nonviolent crimes and that kind of thing, and crimes in general. But I think that had a lot to do with it.
I could also tell you one of my really, really proud moments about 6 months ago. I was talking to a reporter at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel who was writing a column. We had like this long conversation about all of these issues. And I actually gave him one of my little hypotheses and said, way back when I was in college, if they wanted to bust people for drugs, if they would have just walked into our dorm, there would have been a whole lot of white kids in trouble. He laughed. Wouldn't you know, that's the quote he put in the newspaper with my name? And the Sunday paper, which my mother gets, who called me at 7 o'clock on Sunday mornings, what's this about when you were in college? So, anyhow, other comments that any of the panelists have for one another, or other questions, or other things that you wanted to get out? And then we'll start looking at the questions.
I wanted to ask a question of Eric, and this was when you were talking about the sense that men have upon trying to return to the community, of feeling that they're not accepted by the community. And people have suggested that if you don't feel accepted, that you don't really have any kind of a reasonable incentive to adhere to norms that you don't really have a big stake in. And I'm just curious, in your experience, if that is the sense you get from some of the men that you work with.
Absolutely. I have yet to meet a bad person. And I tell people all the time, everybody has done something, but some people just didn't get caught. So we've all made bad decisions and choices. And what happens is poor self-esteem, low self-esteem, a hopelessness feeling comes about. They've been away from their family, they've been away from their children. Fathers are looked at as a child support payment, so if you don't have a job, you can't be in your children's life. There's probation and parole. They have all these other classes. They have outstanding fines, no driver's license, and they're expected to reacclimate themselves back into the community, into their children's lives. But answering your question, I would say, to have a grown man, 40 plus years old, sit in my office, and I asked him, I said, well, how did it feel growing up without your father? Oh, it was okay. And then his eyes start to water. And then you say to yourself, well, are you in your children's life? And he says, no. And I said, why? Well, I'm on parole, she has housing, whatever, da-da-da-da-da. And it's not that they don't have a desire to be in their children's life, they don't know how to get back into their children's life. And then what happens even when they receive jobs. I've never seen anything like this in my life. A person can make a false allegation and their parole agent will come and incarcerate them. So working or not working, so you're guilty until proven innocent. And so that continues to be a struggle. And my question is, how many times can the same person make a false allegation before they're held accountable for making those false allegations? I think that'll stop some of that. You know, when we get into that African American thing and so forth and so on, you know, the bottom line is people make decisions, people make choices. We all have people in our lives or in our families that we know are making poor choices. But when do we go home and say, you know what, I really need you to be here. I need you to be in your children's life. I need you to make better decisions, and I'm gonna help you along the way. You know, we kind of overshadow and overlook it all, and then when something happens, we don't take responsibility for it. And the bottom line is, the children suffer. You know, I get to meet a lot of the children of the participants, and my own personal experience, I made some bad choices, and when I reacclimated myself with my daughter, I remember the way she held me. She held me as if she was never gonna hold me again, and I made a promise to her and I made a promise to myself that I would never leave her again, and by any means necessary. So I said all that to say this, that, you know, this is a community issue. This isn't, this is a Beloit issue. And I'm from the inner city of Chicago, and you haven't seen bad, you know, and we need to really get a grip on ourselves, on our families, on the men in our lives, and really take a stake in their future and forgive them for the mistakes that they've made. Yeah. Don't continue to punish them for it. So with that,
one thing I wanted to comment, just to kind of echo what you're saying, is the other thing that I think we need to do is a lot of the inmates that we have dealt with that have been in the state prison system, and you know, they come out and then they get reoffend. A lot of them have not had the opportunity or the mentoring to learn basic skills. And I'm not just talking from an educational, I mean, obviously that's part of it. But you know, we have a community garden in which we donate a lot of stuff to you, and we realize that part of the reason we do that is because it gives these opportunities for these men and women that they know that they're actually giving something back to possibly their family, and so it gives them some self-worth. But what has always amazed me is many times when I go to the graduations, it's a recap program is what we have. When I go to the graduations, or I go out to the garden and I interact with the inmates, is how many of them have never completed anything. They've never planted something to watch it grow and to be able to harvest it, to say that I grew this corn, I grew this pumpkin. And they never had the opportunity to actually successfully complete a program. And so when they graduate from recap, it's this huge family event, and their parents come or their loved ones come, and they're extremely proud because they've accomplished something. And I think that part of what we need as a society is we also need to provide, you know, I believe that a village is responsible for each other, and we are responsible for raising children. And we need to have some type of mechanisms in place that allow individuals to succeed at something, and that increases their self-worth, and that increases their pride. And so, you know, when they know, our inmates know that they're shipping food down to Beloit, and it's a very good chance their children are going to be fed by that, it's a great, it just heightens their self value and how they feel about themselves. So, I mean, I think that's part of it, that's part of the equation as well, is that, you know, a lot of these individuals want to succeed, they want to do well, they want to give back to their families, they just don't have the tools to do it. They don't have the experience to do it because they've never had it. And they've, you know, not to a certain degree, they've been in a society, you know, whether it's Beloit or Janesville or Rockford or Chicago, that doesn't understand that, and they don't reach out to try and bring out the, you know, the basic goodness that these people have. I agree with what you say. I don't think that, you know, a 5-year-old little boy or a 6-year-old little girl says, you know, when I grow up, I want to go to prison. That's my goal. You know, when I grow up, I'm going to spend time at the Rock County Jail every other year. I don't think that's the case. I think they have hopes and dreams, as all of us do. But somewhere down the line, they get off the path. And it's our responsibility, and I believe, even from an economic standpoint, it's in our best interest as a community to make sure that we keep these folks on the straight and narrow.
I just actually like to follow up a little bit with something. Well, actually,
Yeah,
let's go with Regina first.
What
and
Bob
then-
was saying, I just think that I think sometimes we wait too late. I think we have to support programs. I'm going to put my Merrill Center hat on now that help children at a younger age. I think it's too hard to wait till they get to be and get into the criminal justice system, or wait till they as they age and start trying to help make changes in their life. I think we have to support programs that promote positive character and all that, and that starts at a young age. You can't start once they get into the system or once they get older trying to make changes in order for them to make those healthy choices which will keep them from getting incarcerated. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, and we have to work together as a community.
Thanks. And I actually just wanted to follow up on something that Eric said that I hear from a lot of people, and it's like, when is it over? Like, when can you finally go get your life back? I think we kind of have this concept, this American concept, I've done my time, now I can get back, but I can't vote, I can't go to college, I can't get a loan, I can't get a job. There's so many barriers out there.
Can't get housing, can't get a driver's license, can't get a state ID. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
We call it being X'd out, period.
Yeah, and it's like we have from way early, before we send people, to way after, when people get out. We just have so many different places along the way. So do you have some questions for me here? You're going to like this one. We'll start off with this. Do we need a political revolution to combat the unfair incarceration of people of color? What do you think?
I don't think we need a revolution, but I do think that we need to get out and vote. And I think that we need to make sure that we hold our governments accountable when they try and prevent people from voting. And that's the precious right that we have. And any time that we stand in the way of somebody exercising their right to vote, then we are demeaning democracy. And so it is important that, we need to hold our elected officials accountable, including myself, and we need to make sure that we get the vote out, and that's where we will make changes. The fact of it is that the changes we saw happen in Madison, and even to a certain degree in Washington, took place because people got out and voted. And they voted for what they believed in or what they were led to believe in. But the fact of it is that by simply voting, organizing, and making a statement, we can create a nonviolent change that will bring forth, I hope, the type of policies which will be constructive and effective for our community.
Next question. Who's making money off of the prison industrial complex? Who's been? These are some good questions here.
Who's not? Literally, there are indexes and lists that you can get of major corporations that are directly benefiting from, whether it be prison labor or, one of the areas that I study pretty closely is the privatization of prisons. And if you check the stock index on the private prison corporations, I think you wouldn't be too surprised to see that they're having a lot of fancy dinners with elected officials. And so, I don't know. I gave this glib answer of who's not, because I think it's difficult because the flip side of this is, communities talk about the incentive that they have to have a higher incarceration rate, because this is providing a flow of jobs and commerce through communities. There's a reason that prisons are being built in small, economically depressed communities. And so it's a complicated issue, and I don't mean to be too glib about it, but I mean there are significant winners in the prison industrial complex.
Eric, there's a question for you. First one is, why can't formerly incarcerated individuals go back to their families if they live in subsidized housing?
That's part of their parole. I mean, that's the part of the rules for, I think it's Section 8 and housing. So that's just...
So it's the rules of subsidized housing that a person on parole can't live there, a person with a felony, or
until they're off parole.
okay. Sheriff, I think this one's, or Bob, I think this is for you. Could you share with us the thinking that went into the decision to eliminate face-to-face visits at Rock County Jail, and will you study the impact that this isolation has on inmates and their families?
Part of the decision we did is based that a lot of people, a couple of things. A lot of people have relatives that cannot travel, and they can't, whether because they live out of state or whether they live, in some place where they aren't able to get there because of a physical ailment. So with this computer system that we've installed, they can have a visit from their home. If they have a computer or a laptop, they can visit right from their home. They can visit as long as they like. It actually increases the number of visits they get. And the fact of it is, on the other side of it is that we are very limited with the amount of space that we have. And so, it creates a very sometimes volatile situation, and I'm just going to be candid. I mean, nothing upsets a wife more than when the girlfriend is there to visit at the same time. and that's happened. So, but by having this video visitation, not only does it allow visitation, but it also allows the inmate to access the internet, to access job opportunities, to access drug counseling, to access religious services if they so choose, and honestly, if they want to play a video game, they can do that as well. So, it has created, I believe, more opportunities than it's taken them away. But we certainly are always monitoring it. One of the things that we're doing now is we're going to be adding in like an iPod so that the inmates can actually have it and go, someplace and sit at the table and have some private time, or want to read a book, they can do that. So, what we're trying to do is create more opportunities, not less. And, while they're not doing the face-to-face, we still are allowing, for social services if they want to, meet their children and things like that. That still occurs. It's just that the every Saturday visit, it doesn't. Which I will say, because of space limitations, we were only able to do it one day a week. With this, you can do it as many times as you want. I mean, you can schedule a visit every day if that's something you choose, and you can schedule it with, your grandmother or your grandfather that maybe lives in Los Angeles or lives in Florida and can't travel up to see you. So I view it as giving more opportunity than less.
The second part of that question, is there some kind of study of this, or is there any way that this is kind of being looked at to see if it's a good...
just in its infancy, so I mean, it's something obviously we're going to review it just from a standpoint of, what's happening, and how is it being used. I know that there was some concern about it initially, but it doesn't, at least from what I'm hearing from my command staff in the correction side, that it seems to be being embraced, and actually they're excited about getting these pads are going to be coming in as well. So.
Okay. The next question, for whoever wants to try this one. What can be done or is being done to get rid of the mentality or perspective that going to jail or prison is some sort of badge of honor? And related to that, what's the average grade level of an inmate in the jails or in the prisons?
As far as the average grade level, that varies. I mean, most of the individuals we see that are housed are usually between the age, we don't have juveniles, so they're usually between the ages of 18 and 23 would be the large number, and then as they get older, it tapers off. But unfortunately, we do have more of an elderly inmate population that we're seeing come in, and that's a lot of that is based upon that. Again, there's not been a support system or a transition system for them to get back into the community in a positive way. So they're out committing these petty crimes and coming back in for 1-year sentences or 60-day sentences, and all of that is taxes our resources. And on top of that, the other thing that we're seeing happen is that as we're getting a more older population that's being housed with us, they're bringing all the health problems that people my age bring, whether it's sleep apnea, whether it's diabetes, whether it's, you name it, bad knees. We've had people with walkers in. It's unfortunate, and it's also, I'll be honest, it's very costly to the taxpayers. One of the areas when I talked about what we expanded when we did our renovation was our medical. And we're full all the time. We have a large population that comes in that I must also tell you has mental health issues. And they cannot be housed with general population, so we have to house them separately. That is on a regular basis. We get individuals that come in that have huge addictions to alcohol and drugs. And that creates a lot of issues for our medical staff. That's the one area that we have grown at the Sheriff's Office is we've increased the number of mental health specialists that we have on staff and the number of medical specialists that we have on staff. But with the type of inmates that we see coming in today, we have to have that in order to provide a basic level of service for them. So I hope that answers it.
Okay. Next, what is a person's recourse if they feel they've been a victim of retaliation from the district attorney, the judge, the police, their parole officer, whoever, for speaking out against the way the system has handled their case, landing them in jail or possibly in prison? So if a person feels, particularly it sounds like someone who's got a conviction, maybe out of jail or out of prison, what recourse does a person have if they feel like they're not being dealt with fairly? Who should they talk to?
Well, there are a number of justice organizations that will do pro bono work around complaints of this nature, and I would, be happy to, point people in the direction of some of them in the area. I mean, so the answer to the question is you need representation, from my perspective.
Okay. At any given time, what percent of the people in jail, presumably here in Rock County, are people of color? And what percentage would you assume what percentage have mental illness?
And again, I don't have the numbers in front of me that I could tell you, but I would tell you that probably we're looking at 20% have some type of mental illness. As far as housing people of color, you're looking at anywhere from 35 to 38 to 40%.
Okay. In your opinions, what, if any, changes to our state drug laws regarding marijuana, other drugs, do you think could be part of a statewide solution to this problem? Do you think legalization is a good idea, decriminalization? What should we do about drug laws, and would that help this problem?
Well, I have been for a long time an advocate for decriminalization. I honestly believe that addiction to drugs is an illness rather than a moral defect. And for that reason, I'm not sure the criminal justice system is the right place to rehabilitate someone who has that kind of an illness.
And I guess from my standpoint, the issue that we see in law enforcement is not just so much of the individual that's consuming drugs, but it's the individual that's selling those drugs and the element that they bring with them when they come into our community. And oftentimes, the individuals that are coming into our community have a violent past. They're typically not from here. One of the biggest cocaine arrests that we did in the last year or so, most of those individuals, while living here, were from Mexico. So they had moved here and were using this area for the selling of narcotics. I also would agree with you that people who use drugs are not criminals. They're people that have health issues, and they need to be dealt with not as a criminal, but as somebody that needs treatment. And that goes back to, again, that we as a community have to provide adequate treatment. And one of my biggest concerns that I see happening, and not just only here, but around the country, is the use of heroin. It's relatively easy to get, it's relatively cheap, and it's extremely addictive. And unlike marijuana, where nobody's ever died from overdosing on marijuana, young people have died from the use of heroin. And so when I look at it, I look at what do I think is the worst and what do we need to attack right away from a law enforcement standpoint. And I think that the heroin trade and cocaine, and those are the priorities that I think, from a law enforcement standpoint, that we go after. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to arrest individuals that have marijuana, or trying to sell marijuana, or trying to transport marijuana. But at the end of the day, my directive to my drug unit is we want to get the really bad stuff off the street first, and then encourage people to still obey the rules. Whether we like it or not, marijuana is illegal in this state. And it goes back to what I said earlier about a revolution. If you want to have marijuana legalized, then you need to elect officials that support that position. But until then, I have a constitutional duty that I have to uphold the law, and if you're going to deal in marijuana or you're going to use marijuana, I'm going to arrest you. That's just the bottom line. If you want it legalized, then there are avenues you need to go to and make sure that it's done.
Statistics show that prisoners who spend a substantial amount of time behind bars upon their release are more likely to be back in prison in 1 to 3 years. Are there any changes being made to the better to help for the reintegration of prisoners when they come back into society? What are some things being done, or what are some things that could be done?
I just think we need to work together as a community to be more supportive, to be able to offer resources where people can get the support that they need once they get out of prison. I think it's just really tough. I think it's a mindset that people have for people that have been incarcerated. So, just speaking personally, I think we just have to change the mindset and try to make sure they get to the necessary resources that they need to get in order to get the adequate help that they may need, whether it be to find a job or for housing. And those things seem quite simple, but they aren't. For a lot of people, as Eric touched on, it's just not possible. So I think it comes all down to, again, changing and reforming some of the different laws and policies that we have in place. And that's going to take time. I think we are at a starting point right now when we can sit down tonight and know that there is an issue, especially as it pertains to minorities being in the prison system. So we realize that there is a problem, but we have to work together to make an impact.
I want to piggyback off of that. We need to sit down with them and ask them what they need and how can we help. Bottom line, we assume that we know what these people need and what their situations are, but until we develop a relationship with them, we just guessing. So.
Good. 2 more for you, Sheriff. And I'll lump them both together. Why is there no exercise facility available for inmates? And why doesn't Rock County make more of an effort to employ more minorities to be part of the staff?
Well, I'll start with the second one. We actually recruit on a regular basis to try and bring in minorities that work for the Sheriff's Office. And I'm very pleased to say that we have a very large Latino contingent of officers that work for us. They're deputy sheriffs. They're females. They do a fantastic job for us. We have Asian Americans that work for us as deputy sheriffs. We have African Americans that work for us as correctional officers. I have been extremely proactive in trying to bring in, different segments of our community, because I believe the Sheriff's Office should represent members of the community that they work for. I would also tell you that I have and am very proud to work with gay officers and that have partners, and we support their efforts to try and get equal treatment under the law. So, I'm very proud of that. Would I wish we had a better amount of either African American or Latino or Asian American or gays that work for us? Yes, but at the same time, change moves slowly. I've been very pleased with what we've done. The second one is that under the state law, DLC, you are not mandated to provide exercise. And the exercise facility that we did have at one time years ago when I worked in there as a jail was really just cement slabs and fences. So it was almost, I thought it was demeaning to just have them go out there and walk around almost like cattle. The other thing that would end up happening is that inmates then would get somewhat aggressive with each other. You would have fights, you had injuries that took place. And so where the inmate rec yard is now where we have our inmate booking and housing area. And so, you know, I think that what we have is adequate. You know, the fact of it is that a jail is typically a 1 year or less stay. Typically, if you are going to be housed with us for a year or more, or a year or even 2 months or a month, we try to get you into an alternative program so you're not even housed at the jail. And so as I said, you know, we're 27% of our inmate population. So if they want to exercise, they can exercise at home. They're on the bracelet, they're in the work ender program, they're in recap, they have plenty of opportunities for exercise.
Okay. Last one of these. Is there any study that shows the impact of attending church as a child? And if that has any impact on whether or not somebody is likely to end up in jail or in prison?
Well, I went to a Catholic school, and I would be willing to bet that Sister Baptist thought I was going to end up in prison. So, as a practicing Catholic, I do believe that all of those factors have a place, you know, in creating a strong character in an individual. But I think that's where we get this habit of ours of looking for something simple to answer. If we all went to church, nobody would go to prison. You know, if you just eat your green beans, you wouldn't be in prison. And it's just not that simple. And I think they're important. I think they have a role to play in our community. I think that having somebody of faith supporting you and mentoring you is obviously an extremely important aspect of being able to stay in your community and do well. But it's one aspect of many that have to be done. And that includes the educational system, that includes opportunities for work, that includes being able to have a wage where you can support your family. I think the biggest thing that I think sometimes that has impact, especially the African American community, is the diminishing lack of a middle class, where there aren't jobs out there anymore that there used to be back in the in the 60s and the 50s, where you could get a factory job and you could earn a wage that you could afford to buy a decent home and have a decent car and put your kids in a decent school. That's diminishing as we're shipping jobs out of the country, and as it's just becoming more automated. And I'm sure you could speak to that better than I can, but I think all of those have factors into it.
Yeah, I would just say too that the research that I know is that being part of a supportive community is in whether that's church, whether that's family, whether that's other kinds of organizations, that does make a difference in terms of the connection. But as for specific, types of communities, I've not seen anything definitive.
Okay. So there were a few other questions in here that were just fitting for what we're hoping to do right now that said, what can we do about this? So that's good, because we're just going to give you a few thoughts and a few invitations as to things you can do, and I'll ask our panelists and if anyone else has other invitations that you'd like to extend to people. This is where I get to make my commercial announcement here. So our organization, Wisdom, which Job is part of, Moses up in Madison, that I see a couple of our Moses people got here, late, but they're here, came down for this. We have this campaign that we've been working on now for years, actually we call 11 by 15, which is an aspirational goal to say we should be able to cut our prison population, our state prison population, in half to 11,000. And that we could do it by the end of the year 2015. I'm not saying it will happen, but we're saying it could if we put our mind to it as a state and really, pursued all of the alternatives that are possible. If we really pursued this as a real goal as a state, that we could do that. we're always looking for more people who want to participate. Right now with the 11 by 15 campaign, we actually have 4 different things we're doing at the same time. We have one committee that's just working on trying to increase the funding from the state for the alternatives to incarceration. You know, there's one of the things that's really weird about Wisconsin is one of the reasons that we have such a lower population than Minnesota is if somebody from Rock County goes to the state prison, Rock County is off the hook. That's on the state's budget. If somebody from Rock County goes into an alternative program in Rock County gets the bill. In Minnesota, it's actually the other way. In Minnesota, if somebody from Hennepin County, you know, or the Twin Cities, goes to the state prison, Hennepin County gets a bill. And they're actually charged the way that our juvenile system works. Well, there's all kinds of incentive for counties to say, hey, let's invest everything we can into alternatives because we don't want to get those big bills, you know, coming to us from the state. The Treatment Alternatives and Diversions Program, what we're trying to do is get our state, we're not going to flip our whole funding system, but to get our state to invest in our counties to run the kind of programs that our counties know how to run so that we can keep a whole lot of people out of the system in the front end. We got a second group that's actually working on things in the prisons, things that are happening in prison. I can get all wound up about this, which I'll try not to. We've got this whole group of people in our prisons, actually 2,887 of them, that are eligible for parole because they were sentenced back before we had truth in sentencing. So they've been there since the 80s or the 90s. They're eligible for parole. A lot of them, not necessarily every single one, but a whole lot of them have done everything they've been asked to do. They've completed every program that they were given, and the state just simply isn't granting parole. So we're trying to build some pressure to say, for Pete's sake, you know, the people who are rehabilitated, let's say one thing, we try not to press this too much publicly, but a lot of these people who aren't getting parole are actually out working in the community. Like, you don't even know who they are. I mean, they're out there. They're driving trucks all around the state. I mean, they're out on work release. It's not like they're a public safety problem. It's not like we're being protected from them. We don't need to be protected from them, yet they're being kept in prison. So that's this whole other issue. And then as soon as we win that one, we're actually going to take on the overuse of solitary confinement, which really, as I kind of mentioned before, is really debilitating. And you talk about why do we have such a high recidivism rate. If we do huge damage to people while they're in the prison, their chance of succeeding when they get back is slim. So we're working on that. Got the front end. We got the in prison. We're trying to do some stuff on post-release. Trying to get ban the box, trying to take the thing off of job applications that ask if you've ever committed a crime. You know, right on the front, if you filled out a job application recently, chances are right there on the front there's this big box that says if you've committed a felony, if so, in what jurisdiction, and it's the first thing the employer sees about you. You know, now they're not supposed to, what's weird is they're not supposed to take that into account. But it's sitting right there in the front of the application. So it's like, it's a small step, but we've got to get that out of there. You know, we've got to start with cities and counties. We've got to get Rock County to take it off of job applications. I'm not sure if it's on there right now or not in Rock County. We've got to get the city of Beloit to do it. We've got to get, you know, Milwaukee County, we've got it off, but we don't have it off for the city jobs. So those kinds of things, you know, that's kind of a third area. And then the fourth area is the really big one having to do with sentencing. Since we changed our sentencing structure in Wisconsin, we're all over the place. And matter of fact, we get letters and letters and letters in my office from guys in prison who often are comparing notes with other guys in prison, and they're just kind of incredulous. Like, why did that guy get that sentence and that guy got that sentence when they did the same crime? It's just because they happened to be in different courtrooms because our system is kind of haphazard. So that's something else we need to fix. So anyhow, all of these things, to fix them, require a lot of community input. Part of the reason we got into this mess is that our politicians thought it was good politics to be tough on crime. That a good way to, you know, become popular is, you know, propose a longer prison sentence, or propose being tougher, or propose a new prohibition, propose a new way to be tough. We need enough citizens standing up and saying to politicians, as the sheriff said before, to say, you know, enough already. You know, that's not the kind of state we want to live in. So, want to invite you all to be part of that. There's some sheets out there that say 11 by 15 on them. If you fill one of these out, you get on our database, and you'll get information, and you'll get chances to see, places that you can get yourself involved. And sometimes it's a matter of occasionally making a phone call. Sometimes it might be a matter of joining a task force where you go to a meeting and that sort of thing. We'd love to have everybody on board, and through Job and whatever. And my final little commercial announcement here from me is we also have these books. As I mentioned, we get letters and letters and letters from people in prison, which are just really kind of heartrending. So we actually put a lot of them, snippets of them at least, into this book, just to give people a glimpse, who these folks are. I mean, some of these are some people who've done some pretty bad stuff, but they're still human beings. They're still people who still have aspirations and are still trying to figure out what to do with their life. So I'd invite you, we're asking for a donation for these just to have enough money to be able to print some more, because we really want to get these into as many people's hands as we can. So there's some of those available out there. So I think that's the end of my commercial announcements. Anybody else have anything that you'd like to invite people to at this point?
Only thing I would ask is if you're ever interested, especially towards the end of the summer, we have our harvest for our community garden, and a lot of the inmates who've worked there act as hosts, and the pride they take in showing what they've planted and explaining even what these plants do and how they're used. It's very uplifting. So if you get a chance, we usually post it in the paper. I would encourage you to stop out and just take a look around and see the positive things that the garden can do for people, and how it's, I believe, been an effective change for people in some of their lives. So that's all I have.
So to finish up, I just actually learned this. If you're ever interviewed by a journalist, they say, always keep in mind that the last question they're going to ask is there anything else? And that's the point at which you say the thing that you want them to remember. So I'm going to just ask our panelists, is there anything else? So just kind of one by one, what's the one thing you'd like everybody to take away from tonight? So we'll start on that end and work back.
Well, that knowledge is power, and that the more that we pay attention to what's actually going on in terms of how incarceration is being used in our state and in our county, the better able we're going to be to affect the changes we want to see. And I just a little aside is that I just want to laud your work about the banning the box work. It's fascinating. I'm an official at Beloit College, and I get probably 7 or 8 solicitations a week for criminal background checks from private companies that are asking if I want them to do criminal background checks on our students. And as you can imagine, this is also something that happens in almost every employment opportunity. And I would want everyone to know that the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission has very strict guidelines about how those background checks can be used. And if you have questions about that, I would love to talk about that some more.
Terrific, thank you. Eric?
I guess one thing, first of all, I'm a program manager of the Fatherhood Program in Community Action. I got to give myself a plug. And I work with that population, and we'll be starting a new group next week. So anybody who have family members that's interested, please send them to Community Action and sign up for the program. It's a 3-month program, and we meet every day between the hours of 8:30 and 1:30. So basically, somebody told me once that through my inability to take personal responsibility, I was creating my own problem. This problem is bigger than me, it's bigger than all of us put together, but it is a problem that we all need to take part in. We all need to take some responsibility. We all need to reach out to other people, especially those people who are suffering from substance abuse issue, mental health. We need to bring all of our resources together to really do the best possible job as to help these people reacclimate themselves, not only to our community, but to their children, which is really important. So that's all.
Thank you. Regina.
I just had a listen and talking with some people at Merrill Community Center, and I wanted to talk about some of the concerns. Some of the concerns that I'm hearing from people is that they are being locked up for violent offenses, for example, the child support, the driver license offenses, also the laws regarding houses and acquiring driver's licenses and the state IDs. It's an ongoing issue. I think as a group tonight, I hope we can, if we do nothing else but come out of this working to reform the drug and mandatory sentencing laws. Also, being a member on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, I know we are looking at the assessment tools and the different evidence-based decision-making. That's great, but I think that we have to keep in mind that each individual is different, each circumstance is different, and for some people, they're dealing with drug and substance abuse issues and mental health issues, and those are things that we need to keep at the forefront. And I think more importantly, we need to realize that we have to come together as a community and strengthen our families, whether it be Black, white, Hispanic, or whatever. We have to do that if we want to get progress in the state of Wisconsin, because there is an issue here. We've heard that tonight amongst all of us, and I think we need to keep that in mind.
Well, I'm going to end on a positive note. First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming here, and I think that speaks to your concern about the direction of where we're going as a state. That being said, I'm very proud to be part of a county and a community with Beloit and Janesville that has dedicated stakeholders, whether it's the chief of police or your city manager, who are concerned and want to move forward. And you know, in the last 7 to 8 years, Rock County has taken a great step in different directions of alternatives to incarceration. And we're going to continue to do that. I'm a firm believer in it. I think that it can be done effectively. I think it can be done in a way that's going to be cost effective and keep our community safe. And so, you know, while the bigger picture is on a federal level and a state level, on a local level, we're doing the right things. And you are, as members that come here tonight, you're doing the right thing. But you have to make sure that you reach out to your state representatives, to your federal representatives, and tell them, you know, what your opinions are and why you believe it's valuable for us, you know, to look at alternatives at a host of levels, and why it's going to be, in the end, make our community safer. So again, I want to say thank you for hosting this tonight, and I would encourage all of you to get involved and reach out. And as I said, if there's something that the Sheriff's Office can do, please let us know, and we will try our best to accommodate you. Thank you.
So let's thank our panelists for their contributions tonight. Appreciate it very much. And want to thank our hosts for all they did, and thanks to all of you. Thanks for the great questions, and thanks for being here tonight. So with that, we're done. Thank you.